Will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 64?
The Beatles famously asked, "Will you still need me when I'm 64?" Well, 64 years after the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted at the United Nations, the future of human rights is at a crossroads all over the world. On the one hand, the so-called Arab Spring has literally put a spring in the step of human rights as a driver of social change, freedom and democracy, just like the Velvet Revolutions of Eastern Europe over 20 years ago. On the other hand, there are deeper and more entrenched challenges to the very idea of human rights than at any time in the last 60 years. Why deeper and more entrenched? Because these challenges come not just from the usual suspects, dictators and tyrannies, but also from some democracies that fear that their capacity to defend themselves in the face of perceived or actual threats to national security is compromised by protecting human rights standards. And these challenges also come from individuals and groups who doubt whether human rights are relevant for them, or even worry that they are a threat to their religious or non-Western lifestyles. In the UK, this global context has sharpened the dislocation between human rights for export and for domestic consumption. In other words, whilst human rights are expected to remain a respected tool of foreign policy, presented as something most foreigners lack, at home the implementation of international human rights standards is liable to remain hugely contested. In the immediate future, this is likely to increase the strain within the coalition government between supporters of the current human rights framework and opponents who regard the European Convention on Human Rights and the Human Rights Act as illegitimate interferences with national and parliamentary sovereignty. This is going to provide particular challenges in Northern Ireland, where the decade-long consultation on a Northern Ireland Bill of Rights supplementary to the European Convention is now eclipsed by the debate over the repeal of the Human Rights Act and its replacement by a so-called British or UK Bill of Rights, possibly with some specific provisions for Northern Ireland, but most probably with different or less protections than in the Human Rights Act, as it is criticisms of that act which is driving this debate in the first place. But in a globalised world, challenges to human rights extend well beyond law and domestic politics. With a worldwide recession, the tendency to pull up the drawbridge when the hardships of one society or group impacts on the other is evident everywhere. This has implications not just for migration and racial and religious tensions, but for intergenerational and economic inequalities, as living standards among most sectors in the UK are predicted to fall at least until 2020. With this backdrop, the economic, social and cultural human rights enshrined in international treaties will be perceived as irrelevant at best and threatening at worst to government everywhere. But there is an opportunity here for them to be better understood by people as a unifier, a benchmark of the fundamentals that all human beings need to lead dignified lives. On the other hand, here in the UK, if protest and potentially crime rise as cutbacks to welfare and public services bite, so free expression and fair trial protections in the Human Rights Act will be increasingly relied upon, further contributing to growing tensions around human rights at home. So, as we reach the 64th birthday of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, are human rights still needed, or are they growing tired and old? Challenges also bring opportunities. The opportunity now is to reclaim the ethical basis of human rights as people everywhere look for meaning and certainty in our fraught and fractured world.